Okay, so today we're going to talk about naming compounds. And so let's start with the first one right here. We're going to start with naming compounds with two elements, and they are called binary compounds. Think of the prefix bi, like a bicycle. It's a two-wheeled bike. So this is a two-element compound. Okay. Now, first of all, let's talk about our two compounds. If it's covalent, remember that is where it's two nonmetals. Remember in the upper left, or excuse me, the right-hand side of the periodic table, they're your covalent bonds. And then your ionic bonds are where a metal, one on the left, combines with a nonmetal, one on the right side. Okay? So in naming an ionic, let's start with an ionic binary compound. First of all, our two steps, or basically, first step is to write down the very first element. For instance, if I have NaCl and I want to name that one, I'm going to start with Na, that would be sodium. And then I'm going to write the second one down, which is called chlorine. But I don't want to call it sodium chlorine. What we're going to do on the second element, we're going to drop the ending, the INE, and we're going to add the IDE ending. So therefore, it should be sodium chloride on that one. Combine the two together, and that is your name. Okay? So let's look at each of these. Remember, in changing our names, remember chlorine would actually turn into chloride. Oxygen is a little tricky, but we would drop the YGEN and add IDE, so it would be oxide. Nitrogen would be called nitride, sulfur, sulfide, phosphorus, phosphide, bromine, bromide, iodine would be iodide, and fluorine would be fluoride. All right, so let's practice. This very first one right here, CaO. Well, first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to write the first name down. So that would be, let me get my pen writing here. So the first one would be calcium. So that would be CaL. CiU calcium. Okay, now the O right there is actually oxygen, but remember we're not going to write the oxygen. We're going to write oxide. So it would be OX, start with the beginning of that, and it would be IDE, and just have the two together, calcium oxide. Okay, now the second one, AlF3. Okay, so when I look at that one, we're going to start with the very first word. We're going to keep it just as is on the periodic table. That would be aluminum. Okay, INUM. It's kind of hard to write with this pen on there. And then the F is actually fluorine when I look on the periodic table, but actually we're going to call it fluoride. Okay? Fluoride. Okay, so it would be aluminum and then fluoride. Okay, and also easy way to remember this, the fluoride, think of the teeth, the stuff that for your cleaning for your teeth as a fluoride. And also easy way to remember oxide, I always think of those TV commercials where they have the the oxygen component in there, and they say it's something something oxide. So I always refer back to those TV commercials. Okay, now let's look at naming covalent binary compounds. Remember, these are between two nonmetals. Okay, so again, the steps involved are, first of all, we're going to name the very first element just like we did with the binary, the ionic compounds. And then the second one, what we're going to do, we're going to change it again, just like the ionic compounds with the IDE. But now we're going to take a look, and what we're going to do, we're going to add prefixes based on the subscripts. And those are the little numbers that are dropped down behind each element. Okay, and then we're going to place them together. So let's practice now on each of these. Let's first all start with each of our prefixes that we're going to use. We have mono, which means 1. Di is a prefix we're going to use for 2. Tri is for 3. Tetra for 4. Penta for 5. Hexa for 6. Hepta for 7. Octa for 8. Nona for 9. And deca for 10. Okay, so the other thing we're not going to use, we're only going to use the prefix mono only in the second word, second element, not in the first element. Okay, so let's practice. This first one right here, P stands for phosphorus. So let me get my pen. Okay, so I'm going to write phosphorus out. Remember, refer to your periodic table to get the correct spelling on this. Okay. And the second one is chlorine here, but we're not going to call it chlorine, we're going to call it chloride. But because it has that subscript 3, we're going to use the prefix tri. Trichloride. Okay. Now, if you have a question about any of these, please raise your hand and I'm going to walk around while you're doing the spinning of the notes. Okay, now the next one is nitrogen. Okay, but because there is a 2 behind it, that little subscript, that 2, we're going to start with di-nitrogen. Okay, but then our oxygen right here has a 5, so the prefix for 5 is penta. So we're going to have penta oxide. One word there, pentaoxide. Okay, now our next one that we have, CO. Okay, they're both capitalized, so that's each individual. So this is carbon. And because there's only one O and there's no subscript, we're going to use mono in front. So it's monoxide. That's how you would combine it together. Okay. So it's carbon monoxide. The stuff that's given off when you burn any kind of natural gas. Carbon monoxide is given off, what we breathe out of our lungs, but actually it can be a type of asphyxiation type of gas. Okay? Any questions with those? Please remember to raise your hands. Now let's go to the polyatomic ions, and poly means many, and so this is a compound that contains at least three or more elements combined together. So first of all, we have the polyatomic ions, and that's the little slip of paper that we actually tape to our periodic table, and it's a single unit that we actually give its own charge. So when you look at a little piece of paper, it should have the charge beside it. So an example would be phosphate right here, PO4, and it has a -3 charge. Okay, these are also covalently bonded. Okay, so again, now when we name them, again, the same thing. You start with the very first element, you write it down as is. Now there is an exception. This one up here, ammonium. Ammonium is the only exception. Then you would write the first element down, and then you would look on the chart and find the rest of the compound on the little chart, and that you would just write down exactly what's on the chart, which is the polyatomic ion. Place these two together, okay, and there you have it. So let's practice. So the first one that we have right here, we're going to start, let me get my pen. Okay, the K is potassium, so I'm going to write that down. Make that O a little more O. Potassium. Okay, and then the O is actually, well, actually it's KNO3. So when I look on the little chart, KNO3 is actually nitrate. Okay? And you just use that word and write it down exactly as it is spelled on the chart. So it's nitrate. Okay? Now, the second one, lithium. Okay, and because these are polyatomics, you don't have to do the prefixes on these, so we just go as is. So it's lithium, okay, and then I try to find PO4. PO4 on the chart is phosphate. And that's actually what they're mining the phosphorus rock out of Potash down in Aurora, where my husband, Mr. Bill, works. So we have the phosphate right here, which is a cleaning agent. So lithium phosphate would be the compound for that one. That's how you would name it. Okay, let's do another one. Now, look at this one, NH3, or excuse me, NH4. So that one is that exception where if you see NH4 to start with, that one is actually ammonium. Okay, so that is a polyatomic ion right there. So it's ammonium. Okay, and then we have OH. Okay, and OH is actually hydroxide. Okay, so it would be ammonium hydroxide. Okay, and then the last one we have right here, again, another ammonium. Okay, and we have O by itself, so then that would be oxide. Remember, it's oxygen, but we're going to drop the YGEN and add IDE. So it's oxide. So it's ammonium oxide. All right, are there any questions? Alright, so we're going to stop right here for today. So now we're going to transition and practice with some handouts that we have to ensure that we're good with this. Okay? Thank you very much.